Ми повертаємося, тому що зараз саме час для нашої другої.
It's just the right time for our second panel discussion on climate policies and the funding of green transition in Ukraine. Please welcome Svetlana Sushko, Deputy Director of the Reform Support Team at the Ministry of Environment. Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome at our next panel discussion on climate policies and green transition financing in Ukraine. I'm Svetlana Sushko indeed, and we have an hour of very interesting discussion with our prominent speakers on the realities of the climate policies to decide whether these policies have become a thing today to really support and backstop the green transition towards the pool of countries with neutral economies. We will be also speaking about the plans and agendas Ukraine has been designing during the time of war towards decarbonizing, towards instruments needed for that. We will be hearing now also about what our partners think. We will hear their advice and recommendations on steps to be taken by Ukraine on the way of green transition and green recovery. The climate topic is no longer the exquisite domain reserved just for environmentalists. It's the topic that is widely perceived as the one dealing with economic security, safety. It's also a topic of political discussion. We have more than 700 days of war behind us, and we have quite ambitious decarbonization plans in front of us. Please welcome our esteemed speakers. We have 6 speakers here, and we have one more that we expect and wait for, Alexei Sobolev, Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine, who is to join us. And let us start with Victoria Kireyeva, Deputy Minister for Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. A question to you, Victoria, what are the plans of Ukraine? The matters included by Ukraine in its climate policies and how we're going to put these plans into good use in practice. Thank you, Svetlana. I'll start by welcoming dear guests at this event, our international partners, business representatives, NGO representatives. It's very important to see and hear all of us here because of the importance of our joint discussion on how to properly implement climate policies in Ukraine. The Ministry for Environment Protection has identified 2024 as the year of climate policies, and as my minister, Mr. Strelets, mentioned, this will be an important year not just to build these climate policies of us, but also to make some decisive steps towards environmental standards and towards better projects for that. It's very important for us to build a new Ukraine along the lines of new climate policies. I'd like to show our roadmap and our vision of how climate policies will have to be introduced and implemented. The war is raging in Ukraine, and it remains a really big challenge for us because of more than 150 billion ton of CO2 emissions, because of huge losses of our enterprises, and because of an immediate threat to our mid-long-term environmental goals. Nevertheless, the ministry has designed its vision of climate policy until 2030 and an operational plan for that, identifying clear objectives and ways of attaining them. These can be looked at on our website. And it's also possible to put some comments and feedbacks on that. We want a new legislation with a clear-cut description of climate architecture in the country. We want to go further down the road of low carbon transition, and we place special focus on the harmonization, legislative harmonization and adaptation matters. We do understand this is important for Ukraine in terms of its sustainable development prospects. You do know that in 2026 there will be a huge challenge for us to meet, which is CBAM. We want to have it fully fledged, operational by then. We also need to fully develop and implement the ETS in Ukraine, and now we are already implementing, not implementing, just designing the strategy of ETS in Ukraine to help us identify next upcoming steps along the way to the reform. Also, in line with the strategy, an action plan will be developed that will clearly specify the steps to be taken. According to the action plan, already this year we will have to design relevant law on ETS in Ukraine. In 2026, a pilot phase of the ETS system will have to be introduced in Ukraine, and further on, a fully fledged launch of the system, fully linked to the European counterparts, will have to be here in order to really build a competitive, capable economy. We will have to provide some clear road signs for our industries, and because of that we work on the low-carbon development strategy for Ukraine, and there will be a law to identify positions of strategy in response to climate changes. It will also tackle the period of time for territories after the occupation, after the war. There are specific targets for 2025. The low-carbon strategy will become a foundation for our NDC that we will have to post in 2025. In spite of the military aggression, in spite of the huge challenges Ukraine has been facing, we are doing our best to comply with our international commitments. We provide annual reports on emissions cadastre, informing the EU on that. We also have submitted our biennial report on transparency in line with the Paris Agreement and the related instruments. In order to fully implement our reforms and plans, we need to design a strategy of climate-related funding and financing, tying it to CO2 tax. It will provide a better understanding of the future financial infrastructure in the country. Also, as our minister has mentioned already today, we continue our work within the meaning of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, cooperating on that with Switzerland, with Japan. We have some strides and breakthroughs in particularly forestry and other sectors. Actually, the climate policy is not just about policy itself and the international level. It's also a national and subnational level. This translates in relevant actions and steps of our ministry, line ministries like the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Agricultural Policy, even ministries of infrastructure and of education and science. Because we think that only together as a government, with our MPs, with the public, with businesses and academic institutions, with support from our international partners, we will ultimately be able to build the climate architecture we want to see here and implement proper climate policy here. Thank you for your attention. And we thank you, Victoria, as well. Quite an impressive roadmap, and well, with lots of elements for you to implement already before 2025. Just to specify, I'd like to ask our next speaker, Olena Pavlenka, President of Dixie Group, about other strategic documents. Olena particularly has been involved in, like the National Climate and Energy Agenda, its development, modeling, exercise, etc. I'd like to ask you, Olena, about how this joins with what Victoria mentioned about certain policy beacons for the upcoming years and the work being done together with the Ministry of Economy and other light ministries and other stakeholders. So, dear Elena, maybe you will have more on why would we need another strategic document with so many documents of similar scale already inside. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Svetlana. Thank you, Victoria. Thanks, colleagues, to the Ministry for this opportunity, for having me here. Let me start with the three things everyone has to understand, particularly regarding the national climate and energy agenda being designed by the Ukrainian government. This is a document required by the EU, not from Ukraine, but from every member. Every EU member state has to design, implement, and showcase these relevant plans to describe how they are going to decarbonize their economies by 2050, how they intend to become really neutral. And with a view of that, Ukraine is going to publish a plan of it quite soon. I do hope that quite soon Ukraine becomes an EU member state, which will nicely explain why we bothered about the document. Next, this National Energy and Climate Agenda is not just another document. It's about integrating different sectors between themselves. The designer team working on the document looked into a variety of strategies from Ministry for Environment Protection, from Ministry for Infrastructure, Ministry of Energy, in an attempt to identify, pinpoint the goals mentioned in those strategies until 2030. Then we have a modeling team, and they were to look into how potentially possible it may be for Ukraine to reach those desired targets within the specified time frame. And yes, there are matters that still beg for a discussion from all the stakeholders, and I'm going to revisit the topics. Next, this National Climate and Energy Agenda, the document has to be public. It has to undergo some public debates for everyone to understand what is behind the objectives until 2030 set in Ukraine. There have been already 9 rounds of public debates over the working document, and the Ministry is going to publish the draft version quite soon. In the second half of February, I think, you will be able to check the draft agenda, and you'll be able also to provide your feedbacks, and the team will be grateful to you if you do just so. Question is whether we are able to attain the goals set out in this National Climate and Energy Agenda, again, which is a combination of sectoral strategies. There will be matters that will need some discussion from all of us, like 25% of renewables in overall power generation sector. How we're going to realistically implement this? Will there be auctions? If yes, when? Do we have relevant bases? Do we have companies ready and willing to build new generation facilities? How we go with renewables in the heating area? Whether it will be heat pumps or maybe biomass solutions, maybe other things to be implemented. Anyway, we will have to get together and identify those priority things to be implemented. Electric vehicles and electric transport, same thing. Renewables can be used. Which type of renewables, how and when? Which transport will use the renewables? It's not just about sitting and discussing. It's about some specific solutions to be made on the level of individual land ministry, on the level of government. And just to repeat what Victoria has mentioned already, it's of critical importance to start even greater level of coordination and synchronization between everyone and everything, not only between ministries themselves, but also between them and the parliament and the think tanks because they may help finding best solutions based on the European experience. It is also very nice, it will be very nice to discuss those plans with neighboring countries, which is again a good tradition in the EU. We should follow that, and good to have our partners from neighboring countries with us today. So, in a nutshell, we will have to look for common solutions to attain the objectives and targets slated for 2030. Again, well within the meaning of the sectoral strategies until that period mentioned also by Victoria. I thank you, colleague, and let's keep in contact and in touch for that. Thank you, Lena. Actually, more questions after your speech compared with the number I had at the beginning. So I do hope that this is not the last meeting and the climate dialogue will be a more frequent event for many of us. And let us go all the way from the stated agendas and plans to real policy implementation. And let me introduce SAE Chair Galina Zamazeva. We've been hearing all the time today about decarbonization, so on. So I do think that you, dear Galina, have something to tell and explain us about that. Could you describe the progress made so far, how the activities of your agency contribute to decarbonization? Maybe there are some things to announce from your agency that will be of interest for our regions. Thank you. Thank you for this very powerful event. Big hi to all the participants. We've heard about the national climate and energy agenda and related things. Well, wearing the hat of my agency, I can tell you that all the strategies, all the plans made on a sectoral level have to translate into a national level comprehensive document. And this should be specifically aimed at emission reduction and mitigation of high energy consumption. And exactly this plan has been the Bible for my agency for many years. Well, now we have to let it go, and as my colleague said, to go all the way to European standards. We really need to have an energy and climate plan at the national level with relevant parts, which will be palpably specific, which will help us implementing very specific measures in different sectors. Last year, we introduced some instruments. I'd like to thank the Parliament, the President, everyone involved for setting up this decarbonization mechanism that we created last year. Some transfers will emerge already this April, allowing for more renewables extraction and their use in the public.
So, the programs that we'll be using for the funding, they'll be announced in around a month, because they are currently submitted for the consideration of the Cabinet of Ministers. But I can assure you, that would be related to municipalities, that would be related to businesses, because we need to realize that business is the one to supply money to the decarbonization fund, as they pay the taxes. So we need to prepare that for the next challenges. That's the CBAM for 2025. So we'll be working with population, because we realize that this is the largest energy-saving sector. So we need to work with that. But when we've analyzed how the decarbonization fund will be working, any loops we have, so we've run a number of working meetings with the National Bank of Ukraine, and we realized that whenever we're talking about the energy efficiency, energy saving, about eco contracts, we are lacking the right factor, the right financial tool. So whenever we are talking about the project-based funding, we're talking about the financial companies, because many commercial banks they have some obstacles in preventing the funding of the decarbonization projects and the right assessment of such projects. So when you'll be facing with, I don't know, 3, 4, 10 projects, and each would need 1 million hryvnia for energy-saving activities to reduce CO2 emissions, like whom would we give the money to? Well, primarily, if all would need like this million, then the one who would reduce more CO2. So for the analysis, the commercial bank, they can't do any analysis. So there's this resolution 351. They would have some obstacles. So we'll create a financial tool that's the National All-Ukrainian Decarbonization Platform. That will do the leasing, factoring, and loans for all the projects related to energy efficiency decarbonization. On the other hand, it's not going to be only a financial tool, but a program platform, and hopefully we'll show a small promo video for you today, but just to tell you, we've started working very fruitfully with all the heads of territorial communities in regions of Ukraine, and we understood that we are lacking the knowledge, the technologies, the experience of the West. I mean, the most experienced one and the most economically efficient one, because we need to understand that whenever we're talking about VTE, before thinking whether we would need to have this ETS, we would need to, have energy efficiency, because they require the large investments. And in case of ETC, it's all about the wise attitude, wise kind of measures, wise consumption of the energy. So, this platform, there's already a green university, which is established based on that, where you can get some experience of Finland, of United States, of Japan, Australia. I mean, all the EU countries and the best technologies that were ever implemented. You can go to a web page with access and direct contact to the largest producers of energy efficiency equipment, and with small and medium national producers of energy effective equipment, where you can get the best possible conditions. That you can also register through ID.gov.ua. So anyone attaching to this platform will be verified, and everyone who will be offering their own equipment, that will be verified as well. That would be a wonderful app, free of charge for territorial communities, and within a day they would be able to have a technical feasibility assessment on the establishment of solar panels on their own infrastructure. So they register, they upload their parameters, and they're provided with the assessment on a free of charge basis. Now, for all this pool of the financial tools to work, the funds and the tools to work with international platforms, the international funding, the transfer of technologies and experience of best practices in the world. Now, for all that to work, we started establishing the decarbonization offices in around Ukraine, so that at all levels there would be a chance to run the inventory processes, to have meetings with local businesses, to teach them how to do feasibility studies, so that we could be analyzing them and search for funding. That is why today we're working at all levels. We believe in local self-government, so we've created a special department in our agency on cooperation with local self-government authorities, because they know how to leave, how to, make decisions. Because we do have decentralization in our country, so we work at all levels. So there will be a decarbonization fund, the national platform for decarbonization. These are practical tools, plus the offices for decarbonization, to build the work at all levels and to prepare for recovery under new trends and the new climate policy. So big thanks. Big thanks for complying with the time slots available. We'll have the promo very soon. And we are joined by Oleksiy Sobolev, Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine. Well, it's a safe place here. We have an air raid alert in Ukraine, so we shall be following the news and follow the instructions. Currently, there's no instructions for me. I believe this room is a safe place, and I have a confirmation that this is so. So we can continue with Alexei. So, Alexei, we've had some talks about the ambitious plans of the climate policy. We started digging deeper into the implementation tools that would result in decarbonization of certain industries. We've touched upon the energy climate plan and why are we working so hard to draft it. So I have another document, strategic document of Ukraine, and there's a question about it. That's the Ukraine facility. So could you tell me about the stage of its development and where's the role of the climate policy in this document? Well, thank you. It's kind of one ring to rule them all, from the Master of the Rings. Tomorrow we're expecting a decision on the approval of the budget of Ukraine facility. The program would need to be finally approved on the 26th, 29th of February. That is within this month. And later on, Ukraine would need to provide its own plan. So we have around a month for doing that. So that's the case. Now, the green transition in this plan, it's one of three parts, which is kind of something that intersects or cross-sects all the parts of the plan. There's integration, there's digital transition, there's green transition. So we, in the Ministry of the Economy, we are kind of working on this green transition as an integrational aspect. We're also working on this as a business case, as this would be something that would allow Ukraine to significantly increase its GDP till the period of 2030. And I think that this would be properly reflected in the Ukrainian plan. We're working with the Ministry of Energy, with the Ministry of Environment, because this is not kind of a separate thing, like let's preserve the environment. No. That is the point that has something to do with all the parts and provisions of the plan, because there's a lot of goals of the green transition. So part of that, and part of the requirements in the Ukrainian plan, that's the National Energy Climate Plan. And that is why we were kind of accelerating its development last year in order to understand that it aligns with the overall narrative of the facility plan. So it should be ready in June. We've run 9 rounds of public consultations, and the engagement of the society in drafting of this document is very important for our overall policy. And, the plans are being drafted, but then you would need to implement this. And we are sure that Ukraine facility will be voted and further approved. So we would need to work hard to make it happen, and that's even more difficult task if you would compare with the task of drafting the plans within a short period of time than it is done in Europe, for example. Because it's very important for many stakeholders. It's not only about our ministry, but there's a number of other ministries or agencies of the government with their own tasks. We're talking about large number of state enterprises, society, public sector. So all together we'll be able to make this jump, make this leap forward, because we don't have the time which is available for Europe for achieving all these goals. But this jump, this leap forward would allow us to have this growth and development, because that growth, that development would have us faster into Europe. Thank you, Alexei. And first and foremost, I thank you that you, as the representative of the Ministry of Economy, have clearly articulated the integration of the climate policy into the economic policy and the rest of these sectors. And every speaker mentioned that we have to combine all of the efforts, and the climate policy should be taken into account at all levels. Thank you. And you've also drawn kind of a summary, and you've built a connection to the next speaker, Mr. Torsten Ward. He's the advisor from the EU office in Ukraine on matters of energy, talking about the true steps on the implementation of this policy. Not only the Ukraine facility, not only other strategic plans, but we're talking about the implementation of all those recovery plans that we are drafting.
Now I have a question to Mr. Bullard. Please, you are not first here in Ukraine, and you work with Ukraine very closely, and you know a lot about Ukrainian economy and energy sector and environment, and you are a big friend of Ukraine to help our green transition. What will be the recommendations from your side, or your opinion? What real steps need to be done now to make these all plans really work at some point, and to merge our climate policy with the climate policy of European Union?
Дуже дякую. Unfortunately, I have to disappoint you. The previous moderator promised you it will be all in Ukrainian. I'm the exception. Thank you very much for the question, and also thank you very much for having this panel and having all these different topics, all these pieces of the puzzle that have to come together. And maybe my contribution to this discussion is to move a bit beyond the plans. And what is really important, and Alexei mentioned this, that we have the greening of the economy, this green recovery as a cross-cutting topic in the Ukraine facility. And I'm 100% sure that it will also feature in the Ukrainian government's plan, which is agreed then afterward with the European Union. And that it's also linked with the national processes like the National Energy Climate Plan, which is in turn also linked with experience in the European Union. And I think this is very important for investments, because in the end, if you want to be successful in the green recovery, you need investments. And for that, you need, of course, political certainty, and we have seen it. Yeah, Deputy Minister Kireva presented that. We need to be sure about the mechanisms, and the National Energy and Climate Plan is, as Olena said, the same for everyone. So Ukraine is not reinventing the wheel. Ukraine uses a format which is now in the process inside the European Union. Not even all European Union member states have submitted and finalized their climate plans, and which is also understood by businesses, because this is the basis. They work in each European Union member state, and this, we hope, will also help them to come to Ukraine to invest. The same with the Ukraine facility. The Ukraine facility will be hopefully, well, we don't know, we cross our fingers, will be agreed very, very soon. And the Ukraine plan, which will come a bit later, will be essentially, maybe not in all details, but will be essentially a public document, so that businesses, decision makers everywhere can base their decision on this, which should provide a very sound base for the next 4 years, for investment decisions, for policy decisions, etc. Because in the end, if you now invent a big plan and let's say investors, international partners, national businesses think this is not real and this is not very solid, they will not invest. So our aim is really that we have a perspective with the National Energy and Climate until 2030, and we have a very, very concrete thing with the Ukraine facility until 2027, where we also have concrete money. So this is not just a plan. It's more than that. And we are also engaging very intensively with the Energy and Climate Plan, with the Ukraine facility discussions. And what we would also like to do is to engage in the same pragmatic way with the financing and implementation facilities inside Ukraine. And Ms. Zamazeva mentioned the decarbonization fund, which is a very interesting concept. And some people here in the room will have also participated in discussions when, before even Corona, we discussed what we called at that time a climate fund, where the idea was that it's a joint fund. A bit like we have with the Energy Efficiency Fund, which some of you may know, which supports the OSBB, which is a joint fund. You have Ukrainian money, European money, and German money. And that is something which we hope we can also achieve with the decarbonization fund, that the revenue side for the decarbonization fund from the Ukrainian side will be carbon revenues. We still need to find out exactly how. I mean, we have seen it, it's in the plan. But this can be complemented by international funding, as we do with the Energy Efficiency Fund. There's definitely an interest by the European Union. I'm pretty sure that also Germany is interested, and maybe others. But for that, of course, we need to discuss, and I hope that this year we will really make progress on that, so that at the end of the year we have a very concrete tool at our hand how to do this. And that brings me to my last point. It's the carbon revenues. Because for the time being, the carbon revenues are based on a carbon tax, which is, relatively low. But on the other hand, there is this drive and this political commitment, also Minister Strilets mentioned it, to establish an emission trading system, which is very important because when Ukraine joins the European Union, it will also join the European Union emission trading system. So it's very important to know how this functions and to get there, and not to wait until you join the European Union and then you don't know how to handle it. But what is also important is that the carbon price that you have now somehow moves towards the carbon price of the European Union over the next years. And we would like to engage in a dialogue, in a very pragmatic dialogue on how to do this, because the emission trading system, this is our experience in the European Union, is very difficult to predict the carbon price because it depends on the experience of implementation of many technical details. So that will not be sufficient for businesses to make right investment decisions and for the decarbonization of the economy. So what you need is some sort of predictability about the carbon price. And that is, some states have introduced it, but it was a carbon price floor or carbon corridor. And there are some experts, for instance, there's a project called Low Carbon Ukraine, which have just presented a paper on a carbon price corridor, they call it, which essentially the idea is very simple and very clear. You are here now with a carbon price. You will have to go to the European Union carbon price at a certain point. How do you get from here to there while incentivizing the needed investments and without having a shock of the carbon price later in the future? And how to implement this is a question we would like to engage in discussion. And I know that, for instance, the World Bank is working on this, German experts are working, others as well, so that we can come to investment certainty, which is all about National Energy and Climate Plan, Ukraine facility. It's all about investments. And the carbon price is also about investments. So we may have a solution which actually is a hybrid solution, that you have an emission trading system combined with a carbon tax, which is already existing, so that businesses will know in 5 years the carbon price in Ukraine will be like this. And this is what we try to achieve this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for дякую вам дуже за
Thank you indeed for this practical advice. And really, Ukraine and its environment ministry are working intensely with Germany, with the GZ, with World Bank, of shaping the vision and proper implementation of the pilot phase of ETS project to see it become a foundation for further plans that have been outlined today. Meanwhile, I'd like to go to another speaker with a question about recommendations From their sides, we've been working with European partners on a daily basis. We already have a clear vision of what they want from us. Meanwhile, we have with us Ms. Isabella Teixeira. She represents SEBRI. And we'd really like to ask Mr. Teixeira for her recommendation, given her sizable experience in climate policies, as to what Ukraine might need to do, what Ukraine should focus primarily, even on the background of this war, when shaping its climate policies.
And I would like to ask you, you maybe can remove the translation. Yeah, I would like to ask you what will be take into account your huge experience in climate policy. What would you recommend for Ukraine to focus on, and which maybe lessons of Brasilia you could on the lessons of Brasilia you could say some advices to Ukraine what we should focus on?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me and my team. The Brazilians, we are here. Okay, we live in the other side of the world, and yes, in the extreme south of the world. And I was the Brazilian the head of Brazilian delegation during Paris Agreement negotiations, and I have been discussing climate in the last 30 years. So the first point here is not necessarily a recommendation, but to observe the diversity of situations around the world and the responsibilities that you have from different nations to deal and to tackle climate change. And this is very important because here you have, as mentioned before, all the European-driven perspectives that are coming on board. This is very important. But Ukraine is a country that should play as a solution provider. And not necessarily the countries around the world, they have solutions to be provided soon. And this is very important to understand, because climate resilience means that you must know how to manage climate risks, but you must understand that we are discussing phasing out and phasing up of new things. And for this, you need to have solutions. And you need to understand how to share solutions. And you need to understand that climate agenda is a development agenda. How the countries will come to promote inclusive development. And this means that you need to understand not only climate policies that we're discussing here, but I suggest that you understand better climate politics. Okay? And also this means that we are discussing geopolitics, that Ministers for Environment must learn economy. Ministers of Environment must understand social perspectives. And Ministers of Environment must understand that we need to go beyond the environmentalism if you want to be part of this new momentum of the humankind, if you want to be constructive and to understand that our responsibility is connect the dots and provide innovative narratives that not necessarily are under our domain. And this is very important to observe, because some countries believe that they can have the power to domain or to control the narratives. I'm sorry, but this is not true. Because this means when you go into phasing out, for example, oil or fossil fuels, everyone discusses the pressure on country producers, but nobody wants to discuss the consumers. They have to tell us when they should stop because they buy oil. And this means that behind the scenes, it's very nice that to have some economic aspects here, that behind the scenes, we need to have insurance companies into the room. How much you want to pay to replace things? How much do you want to assume the risk, the climate risk? How much you want to transfer the cost for the societies? This is what's happening when you come into the climate debate, when you're going to development debate, and you're coming together in the world that we negotiated the climate regime last century, in Rio 92 in my country. You are putting this in practice now in this century, 21st century, when you have different situations. It's not only developing in the developing world. You had emerging economies. You had like-minded blocks arrangements like BRICS BRICS Plus, G20, G7. Where are the money? Where is the money, sorry? Tell me who has the money, the trillions of dollars that we need to change? And how will face social inequalities and environmental inequalities? It's very important. This country is a beautiful country. I'm very honored to visit your country, to know your country for the first time. This is my handicap. I do apologize for this. But look, we cannot understand Ukraine in climate age as a commodity provider. We need to add value. We need to understand also how your people, your society, after the war, will deal with climate transformation as part of the new narrative of development and also welfare being that we want to have. And you know this because we met in Dubai, and you saw the diversity of situation, the complexity to bring people together, to connect the dots, and to make sure that you are not managing individual silos or isolated silos that you believe that you control. There is no possibility to control nature risks. Nobody controls nature risks. So my experience makes me believe that we need to come together. And to come together, we need to share values. And to come together, we need to share solidarity. And for this is a new mindset that must emerge in the world, not necessarily looking forward to geopolitical polarized situations, because you cannot manage this, but make sure that we share climate risks. We share nature risks. So my recommendation is that if you can have one recommendation or suggestion, it's better suggestion, that Ukraine reemerge as a nature-based society and come together in a country like Brazil that we're looking forward to address nature, to be a nature-based society. There are new values, new understanding. We need to understand here, for example, if you go in the traditional way to approach some policies, this means the lifestyles in European countries is 10 times the carbon footprint, bigger than the rest of the world. And this model is not replicable because you don't have natural resource enough to deal with 10 billion people in this planet. The process is so disruptive. So we need to understand our difference to come together. So my recommendation or my understanding is that it's impressive how this country has alternatives. But go beyond your frontiers. Try to understand better the world. Go into the bilateral cooperation, dialogue with the diversity of the world, because we can be together solutions providers. And my feeling, my last comment, is that please avoid green wishing, not greenwashing, but avoid green wishing. And don't forget that sometimes, or the majority of the time, people want to discuss green based on the dollar green. Okay? And I hope that we can come with really innovative perspectives, consider green, because this is a country with nature assets, as my country is. So my feeling is that we are going to Brazil for COP30. COP30 means Paris plus 10 years. This means that we have a huge challenge for a new net zero global system by 2050. So we need to change the ambition, but we need transparency and we need accountability. To rebuild this country, you raise ambitions. We know this. Okay, but we need to understand how to raise ambition and mitigate and be prepared in adaptation. Of course, we'll be prepared to be resilient and convince your society, make sure that your society is a partner to avoid setbacks in the future. They must be committed. They must understand it's a new transition, and this must not be based on tragedy. Please, no. And I'm learning here in your country, because of the war, or the people that I'm meeting, that we can redefine hope. So bring the low-carbon hope into your trajectory, and be sure that Ukraine will come back to the world, make sure that we're a solution provider, and also solidarity. My feeling is that this is an agenda that will have convergence of digital age with climate age and bio age. The emerging age is bio. It's nature. And you have assets here that must be seen and understood as part of the quality of life of all Ukrainians and also of the world. So I'm waiting for you in Brazil, okay? And not only with your plans, very nice, welcome, roadmaps. Oh, this is really, really good for coffee breaks and we can discuss, etc., but for the real world, let's tackle poverty, hunger. This is a country absolutely important to tackle hunger around the world.
Thank you. Thank
so
you,
let's do it. Why not?
I still have thousands of questions to you, and I
Don't
hope we can
forget,
continue.
I have to go.
But we need to move because we have so not much time. We have to move to our last speaker. Я, напевно, перейду на українську, перепрошую. Пан Кирило Криволап, виконавчий директор Центру економічного відновлення, асоційований партнер
Kirill Krivolap, associate partner of the Innovation Renewable Center. He will be speaking about green transition and funding mechanisms. I think not every stone has been turned on the way towards this funding mechanism. So, dear Kirill, what are other opportunities for Ukraine to how to correctly use them? Because funding climate measures can be a problem even for the biggest and most successful, economically successful countries. And Ukraine definitely will have to collect relevant experience. Yep, it is very important to hear the experience of overseas partners. And being the final concluding panelist, I will tackle three main topics: money, non-financial instruments, and coordination. The funding of green transition requires some strong infrastructure that has trust and is supported by international partners. Speaking about what other resources do we have besides ETS, besides carbon taxes, well, it begs a wider view of the picture. First of all, there is an excess of structural funds of the EU. We have specific support within the meaning of the Ukraine facility. We have international support, we have private capital, and again, it is about proper business environment, proper respect to private property, if we are to invite and involve private sector. It requires clear rules of the game to operate. From here, the topic of liberalizing markets, the energy market, the reforms in the gas production and supply area, transition towards market pricing, and so on. Another bit of the equation is about reparations, or other ways of mobilizing funds for Ukrainian recovery measures. In my center, we say that after big wars like that, countries would normally recruit up to 60% of the available financial resources within the span of 2.5-3 years to really bring the recovery efforts into fruition. It's also a matter of how the money are going to be used. Are there any rules? Whether they will be spent and used according to traditional rules, or the government will do some other steps. It will ultimately depend on us. Also, supranational components like Paris Agreement, emission trading quotas, and that's just to say that there are money, not just within the ETS system. There are multiple sources, and they all have to be tapped. Regarding infrastructure, now we have some understanding vision of the Ukrainian Decarbonization Fund. This is already sort of a safety box to collect money and redistribute them according to preset rules. We already have the Ukrainian Climate Office, and the Ministry for Environment tries to mobilize all the available resources to ensure support of this challenging process. Meanwhile, I'd like to discuss how the money are used. Let's check the volumes. Free quotas in the EU are being phased out gradually. Meanwhile, the financial inflows of the markets are growing, and $158 billion will be generated on the market next year, which is a huge amount of money, about a third of them coming from funds, also non-budgetary. Variety of support programs are involved as well. Let us see how they do, how our neighbors are doing that. There are countries that provide more money for such climate instruments, receiving less. There are countries like Romania, Poland that donate more to those financial mechanisms but get more in return. There are even countries that sometimes are not able to properly use all the money available to them. Like 20% may be easily be underspent. This all makes for lessons for us to learn. In terms of non-financial instruments, let us not forget about savings. It's about energy efficiency, it's about reusing resources. Everything is about the resources for our green transition. The land ministries continue with our circular economy strategy with the view that it becomes another source for our green recovery. And my final words will be about coordination. The need for green transformation, quotas right amidst the war, and that is also a time of speeding up our Euro integration process. We still thank the Ministry for Environment for their pioneering efforts. We thank the Ministry of Economy for backstopping what Ministry for Energy is doing. We thank the Mindigital and Mikhail Fedorov for assisting all the participants. This is a very Ukrainian situation, but this is good to see that there are some real pioneers and trendsetters of these efforts that work together to make it happen. Still, they worldwide are creating, climate ministries or some bigger coordination offices. Meanwhile, we are still trail behind. I think we need to rethink these matters, because the mechanisms I described, they're quite comprehensive. Ukraine has never waged anything like that in terms of coordinating or using the mechanism. And there are some adjacent reforms to be tackled. But again, cross-sectoral coordination is a challenge. It has always been. There should be support from the civic society, from the expert community. After a moratorium on national programs implemented in Ukraine, we have no other mechanism to somehow link our plans and agendas with available resources and funds. And imagine every ministry having, 5-6 strategies per lines of activity. This is not much, but these allow linking envisaged steps with available funds. Because of that, I think that the strategy is a good thing that unites people over specific priorities. And I call upon everyone dealing with pioneering climate measures to do something about, fostering cooperation. It could be any sort of cooperation like they have in Germany. When someone is creating, say, a mechanism as itself. Then it has been sent to the Ministry of Economy for financial assessment and so on. So let us just work and think together to see that carbon is only left in the frames of our bicycles.
Thank you. And special thanks for the interesting ideas and the summary that you've drawn. Let me compliment a bit. So today, some of these summaries that I've made for myself are as follows. There is a need for a clear plan and a vision, the integration of the climate policy in all the sectors, that is the true cross-sectorial coordination, the need for the emergent steps like ETS, carbon tax and other tools, and other tools that should be implemented, those that have already been established. It's also about the financial tools and combining efforts at global level together with the kind of joint values in fighting the climate change. And the final summary is that we don't have much time to discuss all of those matters and to implement all that. That is why I would like to finalize this panel with the quotation of Alice from Wonderland. In order to stay at the same place, you would need to run as fast as possible. So in order to get somewhere, you would need to run twice as fast. So that's all about the implementation of the environmental policy. I thank to all these speakers. So, once again, big thanks to the panelists and to Svetlana for her wonderful moderation.
And then we're ready to go. But before, please, we have some video for you. Okay, thank you very much.
Україна стрімко рухається
вперед.
Ukraine moves faster with the EU. The Ukrainian platform UANDP is the shortest way to achieve national values under the motto energy effectiveness above all. As part of the first phase of the platform, all users will have access to new knowledge and skills, and representatives of the communities will have their own first design projects for solar power plants. Green University is an important element. It would allow to raise the awareness on implementation of international experience and international green projects. Also, the Green University, it's all about the education or certification. All the participants will have a chance to receive and confirm their knowledge in energy efficiency and decarbonization. We are proud of our partners, and we work on a daily basis on increasing the scope of available solutions and partnerships. A partnership with the platform is the national sign of quality. Anyone can register through ID.gov.ua. If you're a representative of a municipality, a business, or household, you can participate. The platform can do some feasibility studies, design projects of the solutions based on solar panels that you can receive based on the request. The platform is developing, provides new functional possibilities for the participants. We'll have financial instruments, leasing, factoring, loans, and search for funding for the submitted projects. UANDP is the future national platform for monitoring over the energy use and CO2 emissions. This will ensure the fulfillment of national goals on energy efficiency and decarbonization.